On June 12, 2026, something happened that had never happened before in the history of human civilization. A single person crossed $1 trillion in personal wealth. Not a country, not a corporation, one man. To put that number in perspective, if you spent $1 million every single hour, day and night, without stopping, it would take you more than a century to spend $1 trillion. After SpaceX completed its historic public stock offering, Elon Musk's wealth was worth more than the combined fortunes of Google's founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, plus Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, 3 of the richest people alive. But here's what makes this story so unbelievable. Just 5 years earlier, Musk wasn't even the richest person in the world. And a few years before that, Tesla, the company most people associate with his fortune, had come within weeks of running out of cash entirely. At one point, both Tesla and SpaceX were so close to failure that Musk later admitted he was pouring in his last available money simply to keep them alive. So how does a man go from nearly losing everything to becoming the first trillionaire in human history? The answer isn't really about cars or rockets or even electric vehicles. It's about a series of decisions, risks, and bets that most people would never have been willing to make. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly how those bets turned Elon Musk into the world's first trillionaire. To understand how Elon Musk became the world's first trillionaire, you first have to understand what his fortune actually is. Almost none of it is cash. The overwhelming majority exists as ownership stakes in the companies he built, primarily Tesla and SpaceX. And that detail changes everything. Because $1 trillion in stock isn't money sitting in the bank. It's a bet on the future. One that can double if investors stay convinced, or collapse if they stop believing the story. For most of his career, that's exactly what Musk was selling. A future where electric cars replaced gasoline engines, reusable rockets transformed space travel, and satellite internet connected the planet. He didn't get rich by slowly saving money over decades. He got rich by building things experts called impossible, and convincing the market those impossible ideas would eventually become real. And nowhere is that more true than the company that contributed the most to his fortune, SpaceX. Musk's path to extreme wealth didn't start with Tesla or SpaceX. It started in 2002, when he sold his stake in PayPal to eBay and walked away with about $180 million. Instead of settling into a comfortable life, he put almost the entire amount into 2 companies that, on paper, looked like terrible bets. SpaceX, founded in 2002, was trying to build rockets cheaper than NASA or any government space agency on Earth, in an industry where the failure rate for new rocket companies was close to total. Tesla, which Musk joined as chairman in 2004 and later took control of, was trying to mass-produce electric cars at a time when the auto industry considered EVs a niche product with no real future. Both companies nearly failed multiple times. In 2008, during the financial crisis, Musk was reportedly down to his last money. SpaceX had failed to reach orbit 3 times in a row. Tesla was weeks from bankruptcy. Musk put the last of his personal fortune into both companies simultaneously, on the same day, just to keep them alive. That bet worked. SpaceX's 4th launch succeeded in September 2008, just in time to save the company. Tesla received emergency funding and survived. Within a few years, both companies began delivering on promises almost nobody believed were achievable. Reusable rockets, mass-market electric vehicles, and eventually, contracts with NASA itself. By the late 2000s, Tesla's stock had begun a climb that would become one of the most dramatic in stock market history. And SpaceX, still private, was quietly becoming the most valuable space company on the planet, without ever selling a single share to the public. That second part, staying private, turns out to be one of the most important details in this entire story. This is where most explanations of Musk's wealth get the story wrong. People assume the $1 trillion came from Tesla. But the real story is much bigger than cars. It's about ownership. Tesla is a public company. Anyone can buy shares, and Musk's stake is spread across millions of investors. SpaceX was different. For more than 2 decades, it remained private. No public trading, no quarterly earnings pressure, no daily stock swings. And that turned out to be one of the most important decisions in the company's history. As SpaceX became the dominant force in commercial space launches, investors kept valuing it higher and higher. Then Starlink arrived, a satellite internet network that grew into a global service, generating billions in recurring revenue. Every new funding round pushed the valuation higher than the last. By 2024, SpaceX was worth more than $350 billion. By 2025, with Starlink expanding and xAI folded into the company, that valuation crossed $1 trillion. Musk still owned roughly 40% of it. Before going public, investors could only argue about what SpaceX was worth. What happened next would settle the argument for good. There's something most headlines about Musk's $1 trillion leave out. Almost none of it is money he can actually spend. It exists mostly as shares, and shares can be brutally unpredictable. Tesla has already shown how fragile that can be. In 2022, after Musk's acquisition of Twitter created uncertainty around his leadership and forced him to sell Tesla shares, the stock fell by more than 60% in a matter of months. Hundreds of billions of dollars disappeared, and Musk briefly lost his title as the world's richest person. The same risk now exists at a much larger scale. SpaceX's $1 trillion valuation depends on Starlink continuing to expand, the company continuing to dominate the launch market, and its AI ambitions actually paying off. A major launch failure, a regulatory crackdown, or a powerful new competitor could wipe out hundreds of billions in value almost overnight. And there's a new challenge. For 20 years, SpaceX built in private, away from scrutiny. Now it faces quarterly earnings, analyst pressure, and short sellers looking for cracks. That's a very different game. That raises a bigger question. Did Musk actually deserve to become the world's first trillionaire? In 2025, Tesla shareholders approved the largest executive compensation package in corporate history. One that, if Musk hit a series of extreme targets, could eventually approach $1 trillion on its own. Supporters call it earned. Their argument? Without Musk, there's no Tesla as we know it, no EV revolution, no charging network, no company capable of taking on century-old automakers. To them, he wasn't just leading Tesla, he was its greatest competitive advantage. Critics see it differently. They argue no single executive should hold that much wealth or influence, no matter what they've built. To them, the $1 trillion milestone isn't a triumph. It's a warning about how much power one person can accumulate in the modern economy. There's no clean answer. And after the SpaceX IPO, that debate only got louder. The morning of June 12, 2026, was the moment everything came together. Though the conditions had been building for months, Starlink had become one of the most valuable communications networks on Earth, serving customers in over 100 countries. SpaceX's Falcon rockets were the default way governments and corporations launch satellites. And the merger with xAI had put the company at the center of the AI race, not just the space race. When SpaceX opened its order book for the IPO, demand exceeded expectations almost immediately. The offering raised up to $75 billion, eclipsing every previous public offering in history, including Saudi Aramco's record-setting 2019 listing. Shares priced at $135, valuing the company at $1.77 trillion. By the time trading opened, that number was already climbing. And by the end of the first day, some estimates put SpaceX's value above $2 trillion. For Musk personally, the math was historic. His Tesla stake, his SpaceX ownership, and his stake in the merged xAI entity combined into a number no human being had ever reached, roughly $1.1 trillion. The exact figure mattered less than the symbolism. For the first time in the history of money, the word trillionaire stopped being theoretical. It belonged to a real person, and that person was Elon Musk. In the days after the IPO, the scale of the number started to sink in. Musk's fortune now exceeded the GDP of most countries on Earth, greater than the combined value of every NFL team, greater than the annual revenue of entire industries. For many people, it didn't feel like a fortune anymore. It felt like an entirely different category of wealth. Inside the business world, the IPO instantly became a case study. 20 years of building real value in private. Rockets that launched, satellites that generated revenue, infrastructure competitors couldn't replicate. followed by a public debut that became the largest in history. The lesson for founders everywhere: patience, paired with genuine dominance, can create value at a scale that normal startup timelines rarely allow. But the more interesting aftermath wasn't financial. It was the question now hanging over Musk's empire. What responsibilities come with wealth on the scale of a nation? That's a debate that will now play out entirely in public view. The story of how Elon Musk became the world's first trillionaire isn't really about rockets, or electric cars, or even money. It's about what happens when risk, patience, and conviction compound for decades. For more than 20 years, Musk built companies that many experts believed would fail. He endured failed rocket launches, production crises, near bankruptcies, and relentless public criticism. And more than once, came dangerously close to losing everything. But he kept going. He resisted the temptation to cash out early, and he kept betting on ideas most people considered unrealistic. Over time, those bets began to compound. When SpaceX finally went public in 2026, the market wasn't just placing a value on a company. It was placing a value on 2 decades of execution, 2 decades of risk, 2 decades of proving skeptics wrong. That's the thing about wealth at this scale. It rarely appears gradually. It usually arrives in a single moment of validation. An IPO, a milestone, a number crossing a threshold that once seemed impossible. But that moment is almost always built on years of uncertainty nobody saw. 20 years earlier, Elon Musk was wiring the last money he had into companies that looked doomed. In 2026, those same companies made him the first trillionaire in human history. Whether that's the ultimate triumph of innovation, a warning about concentrated power, or both at once, that's a question the world is only beginning to answer. But while Elon Musk was building companies that transformed transportation, energy, and space, another organization was quietly triggering a revolution of its own. A revolution not powered by rockets, but by artificial intelligence. In just a few years, OpenAI went from a little-known research lab to one of the most influential companies on Earth. But one question matters more than all the hype. How does OpenAI actually make money? Next episode: how OpenAI actually makes money.